Alien mother and child were left in flooded planet until a human ranger picked them up in his cruiser. The storm had come without warning, transforming the gleaming metropolis of Neridia into a chaotic, swirling nightmare of cerulean waters. Rain hammered against the reinforced glass of Ranger Callum Anderson's patrol cruiser as he navigated the flooded streets, his knuckles white against the controls. The city's towering spires, once proud monuments to alien engineering, now stood like lonely sentinels in a rising sea. Patrol Unit 731, return to station immediately. All human personnel are ordered to stand down. This is an internal Neridian matter. The stern voice of Commander Drell crackled through his comm. Callum's jaw tightened. 6 years stationed on this watery world, and still the Neridian High Council treated humans like unwelcome guests. Copy that, Command. Returning to base. He banked the cruiser around a submerged intersection, the vehicle's powerful engines cutting through the churning waters. That's when he saw them, a flash of blue against the gray backdrop of the storm. A Neridian woman stood chest-deep in the rising floodwaters, her slender arms wrapped protectively around a small child. Her silver-blue hair clung to her delicate shoulders, and even from a distance, Callum could see the panic in her large, luminous eyes. No one was stopping to help. Other Neridians hurried past, focused only on their own survival. "Damn the regulations," Callum muttered, swinging his cruiser toward them. The woman's head snapped up as the cruiser's lights illuminated her face. She was beautiful, even in her terror, fine features set in bright blue skin that seemed to shimmer beneath the rain. The child in her arms, a girl of perhaps 8, buried her face against her mother's neck. Callum popped the hatch, rain immediately drenching his dark blonde hair and running in rivulets down his face. His protective armor, designed for human physiology but adapted for Neridian atmospheric conditions, gleamed dully in the stormlight. "Take my hand," he called out, extending his arm toward the woman. She hesitated, her eyes darting to the insignia on his shoulder. The mark of a human ranger, an outsider. Around them, several Neridians paused in their flight, watching with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright disapproval. "I'll help you," Callum said, softer this time, his eyes locked with hers. "Trust me." For a heartbeat, the universe seemed to pause. Then the woman shifted her daughter to one arm and reached out, her slender blue fingers closing around his. Her hand was cold, but her grip was strong as Callum pulled her toward the cruiser. The little girl whimpered as he helped them both inside, their soaked clothing immediately pooling water on the cruiser's floor. "Thank you," the woman said, her voice musical despite her exhaustion. "I am Estia. This is my daughter Mixta." "Callum Anderson," he replied, closing the hatch and shutting out the howling wind. "Human Ranger Corps, and apparently today's rule breaker." As he guided the cruiser back into the flood current, Callum was acutely aware of the line he'd just crossed, and the consequences that would surely follow. But looking at the relieved face of the child and the grateful eyes of her mother, he couldn't bring himself to regret it. What he didn't know was that this simple act of mercy would change not only his life, but the future of human-Neridian relations forever. "Where can I take you?" he asked, already plotting routes through the flooded city. Estia's eyes met his, a mixture of gratitude and something unreadable in their depths. "Somewhere safe," she whispered. "Anywhere safe." A deafening crash jolted the cruiser as something massive slammed into its side. The vehicle lurched violently, throwing Estia against Callum's chest as warning lights flashed across the control panel. "Hull breach in the propulsion system," the cruiser's aide-de-camp announced with maddening calm. "Recommend immediate evacuation." Callum cursed under his breath, fighting the controls as the cruiser began listing to one side. Through the viewport, he could see a section of collapsed building had struck them, a casualty of the relentless floodwaters eating away at foundations. "We need to find shelter," he said, scanning the navigation system. "The cruiser won't stay afloat much longer." Estia clutched Mixta tighter, the child's eyes wide with renewed fear. "The old Commerce Guild building," she suggested, pointing through the rain-streaked window. "It was built on higher ground." Callum nodded, guiding the failing cruiser toward a looming structure with ornate spires that rose above the floodwaters. The building's lower levels were submerged, but its grand entrance hall stood above the waterline. accessible via a wide staircase that now served as an improvised dock. "Hold on tight," he warned as he maneuvered the cruiser alongside the stairs. The vehicle shuddered beneath them, its damaged systems struggling to maintain basic functions. The moment they touched the stairs, Callum popped the hatch. "Go! I'll grab the emergency kit." Estia hesitated only a moment before lifting Mixta and splashing through the ankle-deep water covering the stairs. Callum snatched the survival pack from beneath his seat and followed, the cruiser already beginning to sink behind them. They reached the massive entrance doors just as another violent gust of wind sent a wave crashing against the building. Callum threw his weight against the ancient doors and they groaned open, revealing a cavernous hall shrouded in darkness. "Emergency lights," Callum muttered, fumbling with his pack. He extracted a luminescent rod, cracking it to life. A soft blue glow illuminated their surroundings. A once grand reception area with soaring ceilings and elaborate murals depicting Neridian history. "It's beautiful," Mixta whispered, her voice echoing in the empty space. "The Commerce Guild abandoned it years ago," Estia explained, wringing water from her silver-blue hair. "Too expensive to maintain." Callum nodded, surveying their temporary sanctuary. "We should be safe here until the storm passes. The structure seems sound." He laid out the contents of his survival pack. Thermal blankets, ration bars, a portable heater, and a medical kit. Not exactly five-star accommodations, but it'll keep us alive. Estia watched him with curious eyes. "Why did you help us?" "Your commanders clearly ordered against it." Callum paused, meeting her gaze. "Where I come from, we don't leave people to drown, no matter what species they are. The Neridian way is different," she said softly, helping Mixta out of her soaked outer garment. "Self-preservation above all. It's why we've survived as a species. And yet here you are, risking everything for your daughter." A small smile touched Estia's lips. "Perhaps I am not a very good Neridian." As night fell, the storm's fury only intensified. They huddled around the portable heater, wrapped in thermal blankets, listening to the howl of the wind and the crash of waves against the building's walls. Mixta had finally fallen asleep, curled against her mother's side. "She's exhausted," Callum observed, keeping his voice low. "She's stronger than she looks," Estia replied, gently stroking her daughter's damp hair. "Like her father was. He died when the first storms came, 3 cycles ago. He was a meteorologist. He saw something in the weather patterns that troubled him. Something unnatural." Callum leaned closer, intrigued. "What do you mean, unnatural?" "I don't know exactly. He was taken by government officials before he could tell me everything. They said he died in an accident." Her voice hardened. "There are no accidents in Neridian government operations." The implications hung heavy in the air between them. Callum found himself studying her face, the delicate curve of her jaw, the subtle luminescence of her blue skin in the dim light. Despite their physiological differences, he couldn't deny the attraction he felt toward her. As if sensing his thoughts, Estia's eyes met his. Something electric passed between them, a recognition of mutual fascination that transcended species. "You're staring, Ranger Anderson," she said, her voice taking on a teasing quality. "Callum," he corrected, suddenly aware of how close they were sitting. "And yes, I suppose I am." Her lips curved into a smile that sent an unexpected warmth through his chest. "Is this a common human behavior, or is it just you?" "Probably just me," he admitted with a small laugh. "Human diplomatic training didn't quite cover what to do when you find yourself attracted to someone you just rescued." The words slipped out before he could stop them, but rather than taking offense, Estia's eyes widened with interest. "Attracted?" she echoed, her voice dropping to a whisper. "How fascinating. I've heard that humans are more expressive with their emotions than Neridians." "That's one way to put it," Callum said, suddenly very aware of the minimal space between them. Outside, the storm raged on, but within the ancient walls of the Commerce Guild, a different kind of tempest was brewing, one that neither human nor Neridian protocol had prepared them for. A thunderous crack jolted Callum awake. For a moment, he was disoriented, the unfamiliar surroundings confusing his sleep-addled mind. Then he remembered the storm, the damaged cruiser, the Commerce Guild building, Estia. She was already on her feet, her luminous eyes wide with alarm. The lower level is flooding, she said, gathering their meager supplies. We need to move higher. Callum checked his wrist device. It's 3 hours before dawn. The storm should have weakened by now. These aren't normal storm, Estia replied, gently waking Mixta. They don't follow natural patterns. The child stirred, rubbing her eyes. Mama? Is the water coming? Yes, little one. We need to go upstairs? Estia's voice was calm, but Callum could see the tension in her shoulders. They gathered their belongings quickly. Callum hoisted the emergency pack while Estia carried Mixta, whose small legs wouldn't move fast enough through the rising water now seeping across the entrance hall floor. The grand staircase led them to the building's second level, a maze of offices and meeting rooms. Most doors were locked, but Callum found one that yielded to his shoulder. Inside was what appeared to be an executive suite, with large windows overlooking the flooded city. This should be safe for now, he said, setting down their supplies. Estia placed Mixta on a plush couch that had once been the height of Neridian luxury. Try to sleep a little more, she told her daughter, covering her with the thermal blanket. The child was asleep again almost instantly, the exhaustion of their ordeal taking its toll. Callum and Estia moved to the windows, watching the chaos below. The city was transformed. Streets had become canals, plazas were lakes, and only the tallest buildings rose above the waterline, like islands in a vast sea. I've never seen flooding this severe, Callum murmured. The storms have been getting worse each cycle, Estia replied. My husband believed they were engineered. Engineered? By whom? Before she could answer, voices echoed from the hallway. Sharp, authoritative, Neridian voices. Callum instinctively reached for the blaster at his hip, but Estia placed a restraining hand on his arm. Wait, she whispered. The door burst open, revealing 3 Neridians in the distinctive uniform of city officials. The leader, a tall male with deep blue skin and an imperious bearing, stopped short at the sight of them. Counselor Taran, Estia said, her voice suddenly cold. The official's eyes narrowed. Estia, next, I thought you would have perished in the lower district by now. His gaze shifted to Callum, and his expression hardened further. And a human, interfering in Neridian affairs as usual. He saved our lives, Estia said, stepping protectively in front of Callum, which is more than any Neridian bothered to do. Taran's mouth twisted in disgust. Your husband's treasonous ideas have clearly infected you. Accepting help from an outsider, have you no pride in our ways? Your ways would have let my daughter drown, Estia shot back. The tension in the room was palpable. Callum assessed the situation quickly. 3 officials, likely unarmed but with authority to summon guards. Not good odds if this turned ugly. We're simply seeking shelter from the storm, Callum said, keeping his voice level. Once it passes, we'll be on our way. You'll be on your way now, Taran replied coldly, to detention, the human for interfering in Neridian affairs. And you, Estia, for your continued association with your husband's seditious research. One of Taran's companions stepped forward, producing restraints. Callum tensed, ready to fight if necessary, but Estia surprised them all by laughing, a clear, defiant sound that echoed in the room. You still don't understand, do you, Taran? These storms aren't random, they're targeted, and I know why. The counselor's confident demeanor faltered. You know nothing. I know everything, Estia bluffed, her eyes flashing. My husband sent me his data before you had him killed, and now it's backed up on human servers. Taran's face drained of color, the deep blue fading to a sickly pale shade. You're lying. Am I? Would you like to explain to the council why you've been helping the syndicate alter our weather patterns? How many credits did they pay you to look the other way while they test their terraforming technology on our world? Callum watched this exchange with growing fascination. Estia was either an exceptional liar or she knew far more than she had initially revealed. Taran's companions exchanged nervous glances. Counselor, perhaps we should... Silence, Taran hissed. His eyes darted between Estia and the sleeping Mixta. This changes nothing. You have no proof. I don't need proof to start asking questions, Estia replied. How many officials do you think will remain loyal when their homes are underwater? When their families are drowning? A tense silence filled the room. Finally, Taran stepped back. This isn't over, Estia. When the waters recede, nowhere on Neridia will be safe for you. His gaze shifted to Callum. Or your human protector. With that, he turned and stormed out, his companions following reluctantly behind. When they were gone, Estia's confident posture crumbled. She sank into a chair, trembling slightly. That was impressive, Callum said, moving to her side. And terrifying. Did you mean what you said about your husband's research? Some of it, she admitted. Taryn was involved in my husband's death. I'm certain of it. But I don't have all the data, just fragments, suspicions. Callum knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. They were cold and he rubbed them gently between his palms. You just made a powerful enemy. I already was his enemy, she said softly. Her eyes met his, and that electric connection sparked between them again. Thank you for standing with me. Always, he replied without thinking, surprised by how much he meant it. The storm continued to rage outside, but in that moment, neither of them noticed. Estia leaned forward, her face inches from his. Neridians don't typically express gratitude physically, she whispered, but I've studied human customs. Callum's heart raced as her fingers traced the line of his jaw. Is that so? Fascinating research. Her lips curved into a smile that sent heat coursing through him. Would you mind if I conducted a practical experiment? His answer was to close the distance between them, his lips finding hers in the darkness of the storm-tossed night. The first pale light of dawn filtered through the windows, casting long shadows across the executive suite. Callum stirred, a sense of contentment washing over him as he felt Estia's warm body nestled against his. Her silver blue hair spilled across his chest, shimmering in the early morning light. The night had been a revelation, a passionate exploration of the unexpected harmony between their different species. A small gasp broke the stillness. Callum looked up to see Mixta standing at the edge of the makeshift bed they'd created from cushions, her large eyes wide with curiosity. Mama, she asked, her head tilted in confusion. Estia woke instantly, pulling the thermal blanket higher as she sat up. Mixta, I thought you were still asleep. I was hungry, the child said simply, her gaze shifting between her mother and Callum. Why are you and the human sleeping together? Is he cold too? Callum bit back a smile as Estia's skin flushed a deeper shade of blue. Cultural differences had never been so charmingly apparent. Callum and I were sharing warmth, Estia explained carefully. Humans and Neridians have different ways of expressing friendship. Mixa considered this with the solemn thoughtfulness only children can muster. Like how Pella's family does the morning song ritual, but we do the water blessing instead. Something like that, Estia agreed, relief evident in her voice. Callum reached for his uniform, pulling it on discreetly beneath the blanket. How about some breakfast, Mixta? I've got protein bars in my pack. The child's face lit up. Human food? Is it sweet? Some of it, he promised, standing and moving to retrieve the emergency rations. As he distributed the food, Callum couldn't help but marvel at how quickly his life had changed. 24 hours ago, he'd been a by-the-book ranger, following orders and keeping his head down. Now he was a fugitive, harboring a Neridian woman with dangerous knowledge and her innocent daughter, and he couldn't bring himself to regret a single decision. Estia joined them after dressing, her eyes meeting Callum's with a mixture of shyness and lingering desire that made his heart race. Last night had been about more than physical release. It had been a bridge between worlds, an affirmation of life amidst chaos. These are good, Mixta declared, happily munching on a honey-flavored protein bar. Humans make better food than we do. Estia laughed, a musical sound that filled the room. Don't let your grandmother hear you say that. But it's true, and humans help people even when they're strangers. And they're strong. Mixta looked at Callum with undisguised admiration. I wish we were more like humans. Every species has its strengths, Callum said diplomatically, though he couldn't deny the swell of pride at her words. Neridians have built an incredible civilization. A civilization that would let a child drown, Estia murmured, her expression darkening. Before Callum could respond, a sharp beeping erupted from his wrist device. The emergency beacon he'd forgotten to disable was active and receiving a response. Ranger Anderson, this is Captain Holt of the Human Embassy Security Force. We've locked onto your emergency signal. Status report. Callum exchanged a quick glance with Estia before responding. Captain, this is Anderson. I'm currently sheltering from the storm with 2 Neridian civilians. My cruiser was damaged, and we're holed up in the old Commerce Guild building. There was a pause before the captain's voice returned, more cautious now. Anderson, we've received reports that you violated non-interference protocols. Commander Drell of Neridian Security is demanding your immediate surrender to their authorities. Callum's jaw tightened. Sir, I rescued a woman and her child from drowning. And if that's a violation, then I stand by it. This is bigger than you realize, Anderson, Holt replied, his voice dropping. There's been a diplomatic incident. The Neridian Council is claiming humans are kidnapping their citizens during the crisis. That's absurd, Callum exclaimed. Maybe, but it's gaining traction. Counselor Terran is leading the charge. Estia's face hardened at the mention of Terran's name. He's trying to discredit humans to cover his own crimes, she said, loud enough for the comm to pick up. Who was that? Holt demanded. Estia Nex, she answered before Callum could stop her. My husband was Callan Nex, chief meteorologist for the Neridian Science Council. He discovered evidence that the storms are artificially generated, and he was murdered for it. Another pause, longer this time. Ms. Nex, these are serious allegations. I have proof, she lied smoothly. The same bluff she'd used on Terran. Data my husband secured before his death, but I need guarantees of safety for myself and my daughter. Callum watched her with newfound respect. She was fighting for survival with every tool at her disposal, including deception. Stay where you are, Holt finally said. I'm sending an extraction team. ETA, 30 minutes. As the communication ended, Callum turned to Estia. You don't actually have the proof, do you? I have fragments, she admitted, enough to know Terran is involved, but not enough to prove it conclusively. My husband was careful. He scattered his findings across multiple secure locations. So we're bluffing our way into human protection? Estia's eyes met his, determination replacing the earlier softness. We're buying time to find the real evidence. Kalen told me where to look if anything happened to him. I just never had the chance to retrieve it until now. Mixta watched this exchange with the quiet intensity of a child who had grown accustomed to danger. Are the bad people coming for us again, Mama? Estia knelt beside her daughter, smoothing her hair. Some are, yes, but Callum's people are coming to help us first. The child nodded solemnly before turning to Callum. Will you stay with us? Even after the water goes away? The question caught him off guard. Last night had changed something fundamental between him and Estia, but he hadn't thought beyond survival until this moment. Looking at them now, this brave woman and her perceptive daughter, he realized they had become more than just people he'd rescued. If you want me to, he said simply. Estia's expression softened, vulnerability showing through her determined facade. We do, she said quietly. Very much. The moment was interrupted by a distant sound, the distinctive whine of approaching aircraft. Human or Neridian, they couldn't tell, but it meant their brief respite was over. Time to move, Callum said, gathering their supplies. We need to get to the roof for extraction. As they prepared to leave their temporary sanctuary, Estia caught his arm, pulling him close for a brief, fierce kiss. No matter what happens next, she whispered against his lips. Last night was real. Callum held her gaze, making a silent promise. This is just the beginning. The Commerce Guild's roof access door groaned in protest as Callum forced it open. Wind and rain immediately assaulted them, though the storm had weakened considerably since the previous night. The rooftop was vast, designed for landing small shuttles during the building's heyday, when wealthy merchants would arrive directly for high-level negotiations. Perfect for extraction, Callum said, scanning the horizon. In the distance, he could make out the sleek silhouette of a human transport approaching. There they are. Estia shielded Mixta from the rain with her body, her silver-blue hair whipping around her face. Despite the circumstances, Callum couldn't help but admire her. The strength in her slender frame, the determination in her eyes, the memory of her body against his just hours before. Callum, she said suddenly, her voice tight with alarm. We're not alone. He turned to follow her gaze. From the opposite side of the building, a Neridian security vessel was approaching, its engines emitting the distinctive high-pitched whine of local technology. "Taran," Estia whispered. "Get behind me," Callum ordered, drawing his blaster and positioning himself between Estia, Mixta, and the approaching threat. The human transport arrived first, settling onto the rooftop with practiced precision. The side hatch slid open to reveal Captain Holt, a compact, stern-faced man with close-cropped gray hair, and 4 armed security officers. "Anderson," Holt called over the wind. "Move your ass. We've got company." Before they could reach the transport, the Neridian vessel touched down on the opposite side of the roof. The hatch opened and Counselor Taran emerged, flanked by 6 Neridian guards in full combat gear. "This is Neridian's sovereign territory," Taran announced, his voice amplified by some unseen technology. "The woman and child are Neridian citizens. The human is to be detained for violation of non-interference protocols." Captain Holt stepped forward, his posture rigid with military discipline. "Counselor Taran, I'm Captain Holt of the Human Embassy Security Force. We're here to extract one of our citizens who responded to an emergency situation as permitted under Section 12 of our diplomatic agreement." "Your citizen abducted Neridian nationals during a crisis," Taran countered. "Hand over the woman and child, and perhaps we can discuss reduced penalties for the human." Callum felt Estia's hand slip into his, squeezing tightly. "Don't let him take Mixta," she whispered. "Never," he promised. The tension on the rooftop was palpable, both sides poised for conflict. Callum knew that a firefight here could spark a diplomatic crisis that would dwarf his personal troubles. "Captain," he called to Holt, "Counselor Taran is involved in criminal activity. He's part of a conspiracy to artificially generate these storms." Taran's face contorted with rage. "Absurd accusations from a desperate criminal." "I have proof," Estia announced suddenly, her voice carrying across the rooftop. All eyes turned to her as she reached into the inner pocket of her dress and withdrew a small, glowing data crystal. Callum stared in surprise. She hadn't mentioned this before. "This contains my husband's complete research," she declared, "including communications between Counselor Taran and the Syndicate, authorizing payment for the use of weather manipulation technology on Neridia." Taran's confident demeanor faltered. "She's lying. That's nothing but a common data crystal." "Is it?" Estia challenged. "Shall we access it right here? Let everyone see the evidence?" The counselor's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Guards, seize them!" The Neridian guards raised their weapons, but Holt's team was faster, forming a protective barrier around Callum, Estia, and Mixta. "Stand down, Counselor," Holt warned. "Any aggressive action will be considered a violation of our diplomatic treaty." For a tense moment, it seemed violence was inevitable. Then, unexpectedly, Taran smiled, a cold, calculating expression that sent a chill down Callum's spine. "Captain Holt," Taran said smoothly, "are you aware that your ranger spent last night engaged in intimate relations with a Neridian citizen? Such cross-species activities, without proper registration and medical clearance, violate Section 23 of that same treaty you're so fond of citing." Callum felt heat rise to his face, not from embarrassment, but from anger at Taran's attempt to weaponize something so personal. "That's none of your damn business," he growled. "It's very much the business of both our governments," Taran replied, "especially when it involves a woman whose loyalty to Neridia is already suspect." Holt glanced at Callum, his expression unreadable. "Is this true, Anderson?" Before Callum could respond, Estia stepped forward, the data crystal still clutched in her hand. "What happened between Callum and me was consensual and private," she said with dignity, "and utterly irrelevant to the crimes Counselor Taran has committed against our world." Mixta, who had been silent until now, suddenly spoke up. "The human saved us when no one else would," she said, her clear child's voice carrying across the rooftop. "My mother says that's what makes humans special. They help people even when they don't have to." The simple statement hung in the air, its truth undeniable. Several of the Neridian guards exchanged uncomfortable glances. Taran's face darkened. "Enough of this sentimentality. Guards, take them." As the guards moved forward, Estia suddenly raised the data crystal high. "One more step and I'll destroy it." All the evidence, gone forever. You're bluffing, Terrence snarled. You wouldn't destroy your only leverage. Wouldn't I? Estya's finger hovered over a small depression in the crystal. My husband died for this truth. I'm prepared to sacrifice everything to ensure his killers face justice. The conviction in her voice was absolute. Even Callum, who had held her through the night and felt the desperate passion of someone clinging to life and hope, believed she would do it. Taryn hesitated, clearly calculating his options. Finally, he signaled his guards to stand down. This isn't over, he said coldly. The council will hear of your treachery. Yes, Estya agreed. They will. Every detail of it. Captain Holt seized the moment. We're taking these three into protective custody pending investigation of these allegations. Any interference will be considered an act of aggression against the human diplomatic corps. Taryn's face was a mask of barely controlled fury, but he stepped back, allowing Holt's team to escort Callum, Estya, and Mixta to the waiting transport. As they boarded, Callum leaned close to Estya. You never told me about the crystal, he murmured. Her eyes met his, a mixture of apology and resolve in their depths. Some secrets keep us alive, she whispered, but I promise, no more secrets between us. The transport doors sealed shut, and they lifted off, leaving Taryn and his guards on the rooftop below. As they accelerated toward the human embassy, Callum felt Estya's hand find his again, their fingers intertwining, a silent affirmation of the bond that had formed between them in the chaos of the storm. The human embassy stood as an island of Earth architecture amid the flowing, organic designs of Neridian buildings. Unlike the surrounding structures, it had been built on artificially elevated ground, a precaution that now seemed prescient as floodwaters lapped at its foundations without breaching them. In a secure conference room deep within the embassy, Callum watched as Dr. Lydia Wilson, the embassy's chief scientist, analyzed the data crystal. Estya stood beside him, her shoulder touching his, while Mixta had fallen asleep on a nearby couch, exhausted by their ordeal. This is extraordinary, Dr. Wilson murmured, her eyes widening as she scrolled through the data. And terrifying. Captain Holt leaned forward. Give it to us in plain language, Doctor. The syndicate sold Taryn and his associates a prototype terraforming technology, she explained, gesturing to the complex schematics on the screen. It uses atmospheric resonators to create controlled weather patterns, originally designed to bring rain to arid planets. But they're using it to flood Neridia, Callum asked, confused. Why would they want to destroy their own cities? They don't, Estya said softly. The lower districts, where the flooding is worst, are primarily inhabited by political dissidents and those who've fallen from the council's favor. Like me. Targeted genocide disguised as natural disaster, Holt said grimly. Dr. Wilson shook her head. It's worse than that. According to these readings, the technology is destabilizing Neridia's entire ecosystem. The resonators are creating a cascading effect in the planet's atmospheric layers. If it continues, she paused, looking up with grave concern. We're talking about permanent climate change. Within a year, most of the planet's surface will be underwater. A heavy silence fell over the room. Can it be stopped? Callum finally asked. Theoretically, yes. The resonators would need to be located and disabled, but there are dozens of them, scattered across the northern hemisphere. Dr. Wilson pointed to a map in the data, and we'd need Neridian cooperation to access most of these areas, which we won't get as long as Taryn and his allies control the council, Estya said bitterly. Captain Holt rubbed his jaw thoughtfully. We need to take this to Ambassador Pierce. This goes beyond a simple rescue mission now. The entire planet is at risk, including our settlement. As Holt and Dr. Wilson left to brief the ambassador, Callum and Estya found themselves alone, save for the sleeping Mixta. I never imagined it would be this bad, Estya whispered, leaning against him. Kaylin suspected the technology was dangerous, but this... Callum wrapped an arm around her shoulders, drawing her close. Your husband was a hero. He died trying to expose this. And I almost let his sacrifice be in vain, she said, her voice catching. If you hadn't come along in your cruiser... But I did, Callum reminded her, turning her to face him. Sometimes the universe puts us exactly where we need to be. Her luminous eyes searched his face. Is that what you believe? That we were meant to find each other? I don't know about destiny, he admitted, brushing a strand of silver blue hair from her face. But I know that meeting you has changed everything for me. And I'm not just talking about breaking protocols or facing down Neridian officials. A smile touched her lips. No. His voice dropped lower. I'm talking about the way you look at me. The way you trusted me with your life. With Mixta's life. The way you felt in my arms last night. Her skin flushed a deeper blue, but she didn't look away. Neridians aren't supposed to form attachments so quickly. We're taught that emotional restraint is the highest virtue. And what do you believe? Callum asked, his thumb gently tracing the curve of her cheek. I believe that life is too precious to waste on restraint, she whispered, leaning into his touch. My people could learn much from humans about that. The door slid open before Callum could respond, and they stepped apart as Ambassador Pierce entered. A tall, distinguished woman with steel gray hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to command. Ranger Anderson, Ms. Nex, she acknowledged with a nod. Captain Holt has briefed me on the situation. I've called an emergency meeting with the Neridian High Council for tomorrow morning. Terran will try to discredit us, Estia warned. Undoubtedly, the ambassador agreed, which is why we need to be absolutely certain about these findings. Dr. Wilson will work through the night to verify everything. And what about Estia and Mixta? Callum asked. Terran will try to take them into custody. They'll remain here under diplomatic protection, Pierce assured him, as will you, Ranger Anderson. Your actions may have violated the letter of our agreement with Neridia, but they were morally justified. I won't hand over any of you to face Neridian justice. Relief washed over Callum. Thank you, Ambassador. Don't thank me yet, she replied grimly. We're potentially looking at an ecological catastrophe that threatens both our peoples. If we can't convince the Council to act, we may need to take more direct action. After the ambassador departed, Callum and Estia were shown to guest quarters, out of a modest but comfortable suite with 2 bedrooms. They settled Mixta in one room, the child barely stirring as they tucked her into bed. In the main room, Callum found himself standing awkwardly, suddenly unsure of where he and Estia stood. The intensity of their connection had been forged in crisis. Would it hold now that they were safe, at least temporarily? I should probably take the couch, he said, gesturing to the sleek furniture. Estia stepped closer, her eyes never leaving his. Is that what you want? No, he admitted honestly, but I don't want to presume anything. She smiled then, reaching up to trace the line of his jaw with delicate blue fingers. After everything we've been through, do you really think I want to sleep alone tonight? Especially when tomorrow we face the Council? Callum caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. When this is over, when Terran is exposed and the resonators are shut down, what happens to us? That depends, she said softly. Would a human ranger consider making room in his life for a Neridian scientist and her daughter? The question hung between them, laden with possibility. Callum knew that cross-species relationships were rare, but not unprecedented. There would be challenges, cultural differences to navigate, prejudices to overcome. But looking into Estia's eyes, he couldn't imagine walking away. I think, he said, drawing her closer, that this human ranger already has. Their lips met in a kiss that felt like coming home, familiar yet thrilling, comfortable yet electric. Whatever tomorrow would bring, they would face it together. Outside the embassy windows, the floodwaters had begun to recede from the immediate area, but in the distance, dark clouds still gathered, a reminder that their battle was far from over. The Neridian High Council chamber was a marvel of alien architecture, a vast circular room with soaring ceilings that mimicked the underwater caves of the planet's ancient oceans. 12 senior counselors sat on elevated platforms arranged in a semicircle, their blue and green skin tones varying in shade according to their regional origins. Callum stood beside Estia at the center of the chamber, Ambassador Pierce and Captain Holt flanking them. Mixta had been left at the embassy under guard. This was no place for a child. Counselor Terran occupied the central position, his expression smug as he addressed his colleagues. Esteemed Council, we face not only unprecedented environmental challenges, but a human interference crisis. This ranger, he gestured dismissively at Callum, violated our most sacred laws of non-intervention, and has corrupted a Neridian citizen with his alien ways. Estia's hand found Callum's, squeezing it tightly. Furthermore, Taryn continued, they bring wild accusations based on falsified data, attempting to create discord within our government during a natural disaster. Ambassador Pierce stepped forward. Counselors, the data is not falsified. Our scientists have verified its authenticity. The storms ravaging Neridia are artificially generated by atmospheric resonators sold to certain officials by the Syndicate. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Preposterous, Taryn scoffed. The ambassador offers no proof, only the word of a human scientist and a disgraced Neridian widow. I have proof, came a new voice from the chamber entrance. All heads turned to see a tall, distinguished Neridian male entering, flanked by two others in the uniform of the Science Council. Counselor Prell, Taryn said, his confidence visibly faltering. This is a closed session. Which I have every right to attend, Prell replied, approaching the center of the chamber, especially when the matter concerns planetary security. He turned to address the full council. Yesterday, my team received an anonymous data transmission containing coordinates for one of these alleged resonators. We investigated and found this. He activated a holographic projector, displaying images of a sophisticated device embedded in a remote mountain range. This technology matches the schematics provided by Estia. It is actively manipulating our atmosphere, and its energy signature connects it to at least 11 other similar devices across our northern hemisphere. The council chamber erupted in shocked exclamations. Taryn's face had gone pale, his eyes darting toward the exits. There's more, Prell continued. The transmission also contained financial records linking Counselor Taryn and 3 others to syndicate payments. Lies, Taryn shouted, rising from his seat. This is a human plot to... He never finished the sentence. From beneath his robes, he produced a small weapon and lunged toward Estia. If I fall, you fall with me. Callum reacted instantly, throwing himself between Estia and the weapon. But before either could reach her, Captain Holt tackled Taryn to the ground, disarming him with practiced efficiency. Typical, Holt muttered, securing Taryn's hands behind his back. Cowards always go for the sucker punch. As guards rushed in to take custody of Taryn, Callum pulled Estia into his arms, his heart hammering with the realization of how close he'd come to losing her. Are you all right? He asked, scanning her face. I'm fine, she assured him, though her voice trembled slightly. Thanks to human reflexes. The council's senior member, an elderly female named Vestra, rose from her seat. In light of these revelations, I move that we immediately authorize a joint human Neridian task force to locate and disable all resonators. The vote was unanimous, with even Taryn's former allies distancing themselves from his treachery. As the council session adjourned, Counselor Prell approached Callum and Estia. Ms. Nex, your husband was a colleague and friend. His work will now save countless lives. Estia's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Thank you, Counselor. Kalen would be grateful that the truth finally emerged. As for you, Ranger Anderson, Prell continued, Neridia owes you a debt. Not just for helping expose this conspiracy, but for demonstrating a quality our society has long undervalued, compassion for strangers. I just did what anyone would do, Callum replied. Prell shook his head. No, you did what a human would do, and perhaps that's something we Neridians need to learn. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. With the Council's authorization, human and Neridian teams deployed across the planet to locate and disable the resonators. Callum found himself leading one such team, his experience as a ranger proving invaluable in the treacherous mountain terrain where many devices were hidden. The work was dangerous. Syndicate mercenaries had been left behind to protect their investment, and several fierce firefights erupted as the teams approached the resonators. During one such encounter, Callum's quick thinking saved 3 Neridian scientists when he drew enemy fire away from their position, allowing them to reach the resonator and shut it down. The incident made headlines across Neridia. Human Ranger risked life for Neridian team. It was the first of many stories that began to shift public perception about humans, from interfering outsiders to valued allies. Estia, meanwhile, had been appointed to a special scientific commission tasked with studying the long-term effects of the resonator technology and developing countermeasures against similar threats in the future. Her expertise in atmospheric science, combined with her personal connection to the case, made her the perfect candidate. Each night, when they returned to their temporary quarters at the human embassy, they would fall into each other's arms, finding solace and passion amid the chaos of their days. Their relationship had evolved from initial attraction to something deeper, a bond forged in crisis and strengthened by shared purpose. Mixta thrived in this new environment, dividing her time between the embassy's school program and accompanying Estia to the Science Council when appropriate. The child had become something of a celebrity among both humans and Neridians, a symbol of the bridge being built between their cultures. One evening, as they prepared for bed after a particularly exhausting day, Estia broached a subject they'd been dancing around. "The resonator project is nearly complete," she said, watching Callum's reflection in the mirror as he removed his ranger uniform. "The last device will be deactivated tomorrow." "That's good news," he replied, though he sensed there was more to her statement. "It means my temporary position at the Science Council will end." She turned to face him directly. "And your assignment with the Joint Task Force." Callum crossed the room to her, taking her hands in his. "Are you worried about what comes next?" "Aren't you?" she asked softly. "We've been living in this bubble of crisis and purpose. When it ends," he interrupted gently, "we'll still be us. Callum and Estia and Mixta." "But where?" "Your life is with the Ranger Corps. Mine was here, but after everything that's happened..." Callum had been considering this question for weeks. "I've been offered a permanent position as liaison between the Ranger Corps and the Neridian Security Force, training their officers in human rescue techniques." Hope flickered in her eyes. "Here on Neridia?" "Yes, and Ambassador Pierce mentioned that the Science Exchange Program is looking for a Neridian atmospheric specialist." He smiled. "Someone who understands both our worlds." "That sounds perfect," she whispered, leaning into his embrace. "There's just one more thing," Callum said, suddenly nervous. From his pocket, he withdrew a small object, a ring fashioned from an alloy of earth, silver, and Neridian blue metal, set with a stone that captured the unique luminescence of Neridian waters. "On Earth, we have a tradition," he explained, holding the ring between them. "When two people want to build a life together, to become a family..." Estia's eyes widened in understanding. "We have a similar custom, though without the physical token. It's a promise made under the twin moons." "Well, this planet only has one moon," Callum said with a smile. "But the promise is the same. Estia next, will you marry me? Will you and Mixta become my family, officially?" Tears spilled down her blue cheeks as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes to all of it." 3 months later, Callum stood on the balcony of their new apartment, watching the sunset paint the rebuilt city in shades of gold and amber. The floodwaters had receded, the resonators had been disabled, and Neridia was slowly healing. Warm arms encircled his waist from behind, and he smiled as Estia pressed against his back. "Mixta's finally asleep," she murmured. "She insisted on 3 bedtime stories tonight." "Let me guess, all featuring heroic humans." Estia laughed softly. "She's become quite the human enthusiast." The other children at her new school can't get enough of her stories about the brave ranger who saved her from the flood. Callum turned to face her, still marveling at how beautiful she was, especially now, relaxed and happy, wearing one of his shirts that hung loosely on her slender frame. Their relationship had raised eyebrows among both species, but the events of the past months had begun changing attitudes on both sides. "I received a message from Ambassador Pierce today," he said, tucking a strand of silver blue hair behind her ear. "The new cultural exchange program has been approved. 20 Neridian families will visit Earth next month. And humans will learn that not all aliens are cold and calculating," Estia added with a smile, "just as Neridians are learning that human emotionalism has its advantages." "Speaking of advantages," Callum said, his voice dropping to a more intimate register as he pulled her closer. "Mixta's asleep. The city's quiet." Estia's eyes sparkled with mischief. "Are you suggesting another cultural exchange, Ranger Anderson?" "I believe in thorough diplomacy," he replied, his lips finding the sensitive spot just below her ear that he discovered during their nights together. She sighed contentedly, melting against him. "You know, before I met you, I never understood why humans were so fixated on physical affection. And now," he murmured against her skin, "now I think it might be humanity's greatest contribution to interspecies relations." Callum laughed, lifting her easily into his arms. "That's one for the diplomatic reports." As he carried her toward their bedroom, Callum reflected on the strange path that had brought them together. A storm, a rescue, a conspiracy. And through it all, the simple human instinct to extend a hand to someone in need. Sometimes the greatest adventures began with the smallest acts of compassion. Outside, the first stars appeared in the Neridian sky, shining down on a world forever changed by one human's refusal to look away when he saw someone drowning. 5 years later, the observation deck of the Neridian Human Cultural Center offered a panoramic view of the capital city, now restored to its former glory and enhanced with elements of Earth architecture. The annual Unity Festival was in full swing, commemorating the 5th anniversary of what historians now call the Resonator Crisis. Callum, now Chief of Joint Security Operations, adjusted his formal uniform as he watched the crowds below. Neridians and humans mingled freely, sharing food, music, and stories. A sight that would have been unimaginable when he first arrived on this world. "Daddy! Look!" 13-year-old Mixta rushed to his side, pointing excitedly at a display of traditional Earth dances being performed in the central plaza. Her blue skin had darkened slightly with age, and she'd grown taller, but her enthusiasm remained unchanged. "Can we go watch?" "After the ceremony," he promised, ruffling her silver blue hair affectionately. "Your mother would kill me if we were late." As if summoned by his words, Estia appeared, resplendent in formal Neridian robes modified with human design elements, a fashion that had become popular among the younger generation. In her arms, she carried their second miracle, 2-year-old Kellen Anderson, named for his grandfather and father. The boy's skin was a lighter blue than his half-sister's, with striking green eyes that matched Callum's. The medical technology that had made their son possible, a groundbreaking collaboration between human and Neridian geneticists, was just one of many advances born from the new spirit of cooperation. "Ready?" Estia asked, passing the squirming toddler to Callum. He nodded, bouncing his son gently. "Hard to believe it's been 5 years since I picked up a couple of stranded Neridians in my cruiser." "Best decision you ever made," she replied with a smile, leaning in to kiss him softly. "You gross," Mixta complained, though her eyes danced with amusement. "Can we go now?" Counselor Prell said I could help unveil the memorial. The memorial, a sculpture depicting a human hand and a Neridian hand clasped together, rising from stylized waves, had been Mixta's idea. As the youngest member of the Youth Cultural Committee, she'd championed the project for months. As they made their way to the ceremony, citizens of both species nodded respectfully. Their story had become legend. The human ranger who defied orders to save a Neridian woman and her child, inadvertently uncovering a conspiracy that threatened the entire planet. But for Callum, the true miracle wasn't in the grand political changes or even the technological advancements that had followed. It was in the small moments. Mixta's laughter as she mastered a new human game. Kaylin's first words, a charming mix of English and Neridian. Estia's face, peaceful in sleep beside him each night. Standing on the platform as Counselor Prell delivered his speech about cooperation and mutual respect, Callum felt Estia's hand slip into his. Their fingers intertwined, blue against tan, alien against human, yet perfectly matched. 5 years ago, Prell was saying, one human showed us what we had forgotten, that compassion is not weakness, but the greatest strength of all. Callum squeezed Estia's hand gently. He hadn't set out to change a world or bridge two species. He'd simply reached out to someone who needed help, the most human instinct of all. And in doing so, he'd found everything he never knew he was looking for: a family, a purpose, a home among the stars. As Mixta stepped forward to help unveil the memorial, her face shining with pride, Callum knew with absolute certainty that some rescues weren't just about saving others. Sometimes they were about saving yourself.